EdXL, GCSE, Mathematics, Paper 1, Non-Calculator, Foundation Tier, Monday, 18th of May 2009. This is the formula page. I would advise anyone on the exam to write down any formulas that you think you are going to struggle to remember throughout the course of the exam. So for example, I'm going to write down that the area of a triangle is the base times the height divided by 2, as I know I sometimes forget that one. I'm also going to write down that the area of a circle is pi times the radius squared, and that the circumference of a circle is pi times pi the diameter. You might have other formulas you want to remember. It might be simple facts like 50 miles is equal to 80 kilometers, and it would be worthwhile writing those down at the start of the exam so you don't have to remember them for more than a couple of minutes. Question number 1 is a question on pictograms, and there will always be a key. And this key here tells me that there are 2 hours represented by a circle. So it's always worthwhile to then go and fill in your pictogram with the 2's, and in the case of less than a whole circle, the 1 in this case. Now from that I should then be able to answer the rest of the question. So part A is work out the number of hours of sunshine on Monday. And from the graph I can now see that there are 4 lots of 2, so that would be 8 hours of sunshine. Question 1b is work out the hours of sunshine on Tuesday, and again from the graph I can see that that is 2 and 1 added together, which would be 3. Part C asks me there were 6 hours of sunshine on Thursday, fill in the graph, so I'm required to put in 3 full circles. And the second part of the question says there were 5 hours of sunshine on Friday, complete the pictogram. So again, 1, 2, and this time I need a half circle for the extra hour. On question number 2, I'm shown a picture of a stick which is in 3 parts, A, B and C, and I'm given the lengths of A and B, and I'm told that the stick is 30 centimeters from one side to the other. All of this information is contained in the question. I'm then asked to work out the length of part C. Well, from looking at the diagram I can see that A and B added together would be 16 add 9, which is 25, and that the whole stick is 30 centimeters long, and therefore the missing piece, piece C, would be 30 take away 25, which is 5. And that's my answer, and I'm going to check they've already given me the units. On question 3, I'm asked to work out 50% of £60. Now 50% is the same as 1/2, and therefore I'm being asked to find a half of 60. And to do that, I'm going to do 60 divided by 2, and that's going to give me my answer of £30. And again, I'm going to put that in the answer box and just check that they've given me the units. Part B asked me to find 25% of 20 meters, and I know that 25% is the same as 1/4, in which case I'm going to divide 20 by 4 to find that 1/4 of 20 meters is 5 meters. Again, I'm going to put the answer in there and just check that they've given me the units of my answer. Question 4 is a point marked P at the top of my graph, and I'm asked to draw a line 7 centimeters long. Now it's important that I go from the cross and not from the letter P, so I'm going to go from the cross and I'm going to draw a line 7 centimeters long with my ruler, and that's the answer to that part of the question. Part B asks me to label with a cross the point which is 3 centimeters from P and label it point Q. So again, with my ruler, I'm going to place it on the cross, mark a little point where I can see where 3 centimeters is, and make sure I put a cross on that and then label it Q. Question number 5 asks me to find the first 4 terms in a number sequence are given to me, which is 124, 122, 120 and 118. And then I'm simply asked in part A to write down the next term in this number sequence. I'm going to fill it in alongside the others and put it in my answer box. Part B asks me to find the 7th term in this sequence, so I'm going to carry my sequence on by going down in 2 each time and then I'm going to find the 7th one. So from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the 7th term in my number sequence is 112. Part C tells me that 9 cannot be a term in this number sequence, and I'm asked to explain why. Well, the number 9 is an odd number, and from looking at my sequence I can see that all of the numbers in it are even numbers. So number 9 cannot be in the number sequence because it is an odd number and all the numbers in the sequence are even. Now, I wouldn't worry about the fact that you've had to use a little bit more space. You're always better writing more down than less. And that's question number 5. Question number 6 shows me a shape on a centimetre grid. It's important to remember that each of these squares is 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre. And I'm asked to work out the perimeter of the shaded shape. So to do this, I'm going to count the distance around the outside, with each of these lines being 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So the distance around the outside is 16, and again, the units are already given to me as centimetres. It's important that I cross them off as I go around, as otherwise I'm liable to lose count. And just note that I've not counted the squares around the outside. That would not give me the perimeter. That's going to give me a completely different answer. 6b asks me to work out the area of the shaded shape, and they quite clearly tell me to state the units of my answer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the units of my answer, which are centimetres squared, and that way I'm going to get a mark regardless of what number I put down. I'm then simply going to count the squares on the inside of the shape. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, making sure I don't miss any. So my area is 12 centimetres squared. Part C of this question shows me a 3-dimensional shape, and it tells me that each one of these cubes is 1 centimetre cubed, and that's shown to me here. It then tells me to find the volume of the solid prism. So what I'm looking to do here is find out how many of these cubes are in this shape. So I can count the area of the front face. There are 5 of them, and in my shape I have got 1, 2, 3 rows. So I've got 3 rows of 5, so I'm going to have 15 centimetres cubed, and that's come because I've done 3 times 5. On question 7, I'm shown a bus timetable that runs from Shotton to Alton, and I'm given the times of the buses at various points along that journey. Part A tells me that a bus leaves Shotton at 7:30, which I'm going to circle there, and I'm asked what time it should arrive at Alton. So I'm going to find Alton in my timetable and circle that as well, and therefore the time it's going to arrive at Alton is 8:30. Part B tells me that another bus leaves Prudhoe at 8:28, so again I'm going to find Prudhoe, 8:28, and I'm asked how many minutes should it take to get to Hexham, and so Hexham is the stop straight afterwards, and that's 8:45. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a timeline going from 8:28 to 8:45, and I'm just going to try and jump from the start time to the end time. So first off I'm going to add 10 minutes, and that will get me to 8:38, and then I'm going to add another 7 minutes, and that will get me to 8:45, and you can see therefore that I've got a total of 10 and 7 minutes, and that is 17 minutes. Part C tells me that Serena lives in Crook, and that's this line of the timetable here, and she has to be in Hexham, which is this line of the timetable there, by 11:15. And I'm asked what time is the time of the latest bus she can catch from Crook to arrive in Hexham by 11:15. So she needs to be in Hexham by 11:15, which rules out that bus, and therefore that bus there. if she catches the bus that arrives at 10:45, she's got plenty of time, so the bus she needs to get from Crook is 10:50. On question 8, I'm asked to write the number 4,117 in words. Now obviously just in reading that out I've actually come up with the answer, but in your exam you can't do that, but it is worth, while you're practicing these, saying them out loud, and in the exam doing so in your head. So I'm looking for 4,117. Notice that I haven't written anything as a numeral, particularly here. I didn't write 1, we don't want anything that isn't written as a word. In part 8b, I'm told to write 4,117 to the nearest 100, so I'm going to draw a number line, going from 4,100, which is the nearest 100 underneath, to 4,200, which is the nearest 100 above. And I'm going to go in the middle, which is 4,150. And then I'm going to try and place 4,117 roughly on that number line. And I think it was somewhere round about there. And I can see from that that it is closer to 4,100. Question number 9, I'm shown a series of shapes, 3-dimensional, at the top of the page, and I'm asked to write down the number of vertices of shape A. So shape A is this cube on the left hand side, and I'm going to colour in all of the vertices, and then it should be a simple matter of counting them. I can see 8 there, and all this question requires me to do is realise that vertices are the same as corners. Part B asks me to say which of the shapes has this net, and from looking at the shapes above I can see that it's definitely not the cube or the cylinder, and it is in fact C. So I just have to write down at the bottom C. I don't have to name the shape, just the letter. On question 10, I'm shown a dial from a speedometer, and I'm just asked to write down the speed of the car. So it's always worth on these questions to try and see what the scale goes up in, and it's usually one of the following numbers: 1, 2, 4, 5, or 10. So if I try the ones first of all, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, and that one does work. So all I'm interested in is what this arrow is here and that arrow there is at 58. Okay, so that is 58 miles per hour. The second part of the question involves the gauge shown below, and I'm asked to write down the amount of fuel in the tank. Now I can see that it's somewhere in between 3 and 4, so again I've got to try and find out what it goes up in, and this time I know it's a number less than 1, so I'm going to try the same numbers as above, but this time in decimal form. So 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5. So 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. Doesn't work, so I'm going to try the second option: 3.2, 3.4, 3.6, 3.8, 4. So that one does work, so this one here would be 3.6. And again, making sure the units are there. The second part of the question tells me that when the tank is full there are 7 gallons in, and I can see that from the diagram, so I need to work out how much more fuel has to be added to fill it completely. Well, I've got definitely these parts here from number 4 up to number 7, that's 3, and it's just a case of working out this little bit here extra. So again, I know my scale goes up in 0.2, so 0.2, 0.4. So in total, 3.4 gallons. On question 11, I'm asked to write down the coordinates of point B, so what I need to remember is that you go along the corridor first and up the stairs second. So the coordinates of point P is I've gone along 4 and I've gone up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my coordinates are 4, 6, and they've already written the brackets in for me. 11b, I'm asked to write down the coordinates of point Q. So this time I'm along the corridor, but I don't move along the corridor, so I have gone along 0 and I have gone up 1, 2, 3. And the final part, part C, I'm told that M is the midpoint of the line Q to P. Find the coordinates of M. So what I need to do is imagine I am halfway along this line. Now I'm going to split it up into a triangle, and I can see that I've gone 4 across, and then I've gone 3 up. So half of that would be there, which is 2 across, 1, 2, and 1.5 up. And now it's a simple case of writing down the coordinates of the point M. So again, from the origin, 1 across, 2 across, and I have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 up. On question 12, I'm given the information about some cities in the United Kingdom and their temperatures. I'm asked to write down the lowest temperature, so I'm going to find the highest temperature, which is Plymouth, 5, and I'm going to draw a number line, and I'm going to write 5. And all I'm going to do now is work backwards, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2, -3, and -4. And I can see that all of these times are now contained on this number line. For example, 5 is Plymouth, -1 would be London, which is there, 2 degrees would be Leeds, which is there, -4 is Edinburgh, and -2 is Cardiff. I can see from my number line, because I've worked backwards from the positive numbers, that the lowest temperature is -4. I'm asked to work out the difference in temperature between Cardiff and Plymouth in part B. So again, I'm going to draw a number line, and I've got Cardiff at -2, and I've got Plymouth at 5. So I'm simply going to work out how to get from Cardiff up to Plymouth. First off, I'm going to jump up by 2 to 0, and then I'm going to jump from 0 to 5 by adding a further 5, and therefore in total I've added 7, and therefore that's the difference. In part C, I'm asked to work out the temperature, which is halfway between -1 and 5 degrees. So again, I'm going to draw a number line, and I'm going to start at -1, and I'm going to keep going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just going to try and find which is in the middle by working my way in one step at a time. One from the bottom end, and then one from the top end. And I can see from that that the temperature in the middle is 2 degrees C, and my units are already there. On question 13, I'm given some probability words at the top, ranging from impossible to certain, and I'm just asked to pick from the box. So part A says you throw an ordinary dice and you get an 8. Now an ordinary dice has the numbers going from 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 6. So obviously you can't get an 8, so that would therefore be impossible. On 13B, you throw a coin and you get heads. Well, on a coin, I've got the options are heads and tails. So obviously I've got a 1 in 2 chance, or half, of getting a heads, and therefore the word for that would be evens. And part C asks me that the December the 6th, 2008 is the day after December the 5th, 2008, which is always going to happen, and therefore that would be certain. On question 14, I'm being asked to work out some sums involving multiplications and subtractions, some additions and some brackets. So this is a question that relies on my knowledge of BODMAS, which is the order in which we do sums, and that obviously stands for B stands for brackets, and O stands for operations, the D for division, the M for multiplication, I'm just going to write multiply here, A for addition or add, and the S for subtract. So in the first question, I need to figure out whether I'm going to do 4 times 5 first, or 5 take away 8, and that's based on I work my way down from the top, doing whatever I come to first. So 4 multiplied by 5 would be a multiply, which would be here, and 5 take away 8 is a subtract, and therefore obviously I've got to do the multiply first, as I came to it first as I worked my way down. So 4 times by 5 would be 20, and I'm taking away 8, and 20 take away 8 is 12, and that's my answer. In part B, I've got an add and I've got a multiply. So again, working my way down from the top, I've got an add and I've got a multiply. And again, the multiply comes before the add, so I'm going to do the multiply first. 2 times by 3 is 6, and I've still got, and I'm leaving in the same order, 18 add at the start of the sum. 18 add 6 is 24. In part C, I've got myself a set of brackets, and I've also got a multiply again. So you can see that the brackets come before the multiply, so I'm going to do the brackets first. So inside the brackets I've got 4 add 3, which would give me 7, and I'm going to still have to times that by 7. And 7 times 7 is 49. Question 15 is on some algebra basics. So I've got 8 x's and I need to take away 4 x's. Now, if you struggle with this, you might need to draw out the fact that you've got 8 x's, 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to take away 4 of them. And I'm simply left with 4x. Notice I haven't lost the x, it's still there. On part B, I've got y times y times y, and that would be y, and we need to be clear about this. This is a little power, so it needs to be written slightly above the y. 15c, I've got 4x, add 3y, take away 2x, add 5y. Now I'll start with the first term, which is 4x, and I'm told to take away from it 2x. So I've got 4x take away 2x. And that, based on what I've done above, is 2x. Now, the second part of the question, I've got add 3y, add 5y. So I'm going to add 3y, and then I'm going to add 5y. And that's going to be the same as adding a total of 8y. So it's going to be 2x, add 8y. On question 16, I'm asked to make an accurate drawing of the triangle ABC. It's from A to B to C. I'm told that AB is 6.5 centimeters, and that the angle BAC is 60 degrees, and the angle ABC is 30 degrees. They've drawn the line AB for me down here at 6.5 centimeters. So the first thing I need to do is place my protractor, making sure I line up the crosshairs here on the end of the line AB, and then I need to draw my angle of 60 degrees. Now I've got 60 degrees on the inside of my protractor, and I've got 60 degrees on the outside. So what I need to do is decide which one of those I'm going to use. And to do that, I look at where the 0 on my protractor is. And in this case, the 0 here is the one on the line. This one is obviously not on the line AB, and I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to count around from 0, 10, 20, 30, keep going until I get to 60, and make a little mark. And I've already made one there previously. I'm going to take a ruler, and I'm going to go through A, through that point, and just keep that line going for a reasonable distance. I'm then going to repeat the process at the point B. So I'm going to place my protractor on the line AB again. And again, this time I'm going to draw a 30 degree angle. And again, I've got 0 here on the inside, which isn't on the line, and I've got 0 here on the outside, which is on the line I'm using. And therefore this time I'm going to use the numbers on the outside. So 0, 10, 20, 30. And again, I'm going to make a little mark there. And I'm going to take my ruler, place it on the line at B, and I'm going to go through that point. Now I don't need to rub out any of these lines here, I just need to label that C, and I've made an accurate drawing of the triangle ABC. Now in part B, it asks me to measure the size of the angle at C in your triangle. So it wants me to measure this angle. Now there's a couple of ways of doing it, I'll show you both. The first one, and I wouldn't do it this way in the exam, is to place your protractor on C so that you can actually measure the angle. Again, I've got the crosshairs lined up, and I've got 0 running down this part of my triangle. I can then measure round from that 0 and count round to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So that will be 90 degrees. And that's this angle here at C. What I would actually do in the exam is to take my piece of paper and twist it round so that I've got one of these lines running horizontal as far as I'm concerned. So I'm looking from this direction. And that just makes it a little bit easier for me to place my protractor again on the point C, and just to measure around still from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up to 90, and I'm going to get the same answer. In question 17, it's a multiplication that I'm asked to do 36 times by 24. So a couple of methods for this. I'm going to go over a couple. The first one is the box method. where I split 36 into 30 and 6, and 24 into 20 and 4. I can then multiply both numbers together, so 3 times 2 is 6, and I've got 2 zeros to put back on, so it'll be 600. 3 times 4 is 12, and I've got 1 0, so 1 0 to put back on. 6 times 20, well 6 times 2 would be 12, and I've got 1 0 to put back on, and 6 times 4 is 24. And then I'm going to line them up underneath and add them up. I'm not going to try and do it in my head, I'm just going to make sure I take my time, show my working. So this column is going to add up from 4, remembering that I add in that direction. This is going to be 6, and I'm going to get here 6, 1 and 1 is going to give me 8. So my answer is going to be 864. Now a few people might use a slightly different method, whereby we split the diagram up and we draw the grid like this, and we would have 3 and 6 on the top and 2 and 4 down the side. Now either method's fine, I'll just go over this one so you can see they both give you the same answer. 6 times by 2 is 12, so the tens go above the line and the units go underneath. 6 times by 4 is 24. 2 times by 3 for this box would be 6, so that would be 0 tens and 6 units. And 3 times by 4 would give me this box, which would be 12, and that would be written like that. And again, I work my way around this way, so I'm going to have a 4, 2, 2, 2, which would give me 6, a 1 added to 6 added to a 1 would give me an 8. And in both cases I've got 864. Either answer is perfectly fine. On question 18, I'm asked to say whether James or Ben is right, and James believes that the lines AB and DC are parallel, and Ben thinks they're not parallel. I've got to say who's right, and then I've got to give a reason, and that's the important bit. I need to make sure I give a good reason. So there are loads of ways of doing this question. I would encourage you to maybe carry the line on either side, and then I can work out the missing angles here and here, and then I can decide whether these lines are parallel. So using the fact that angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees, I can see that this here is going to be 180, take away 96, and that is going to be 84. I can see that this one here is going to be 180, take away 88, which is going to be 92. Now I can see from this I've got an angle of 92 and 88 here, and an angle of 96 and 84, and therefore the two angles here which correspond, the 92 and the 96, are not the same, and therefore those lines aren't parallel. So I can say that in this case Ben was right, and then I have to give a reason as to why Ben was right. Now I would say the angles are different at points B and C. There are lots of different explanations in terms of how you would explain this, but as long as you give enough information, I think the examiners will be happy. On question 19, I'm asked to work out the size of angle P, and as covered in the previous question, I know that there are 180 degrees on a straight line. So I simply need to do 180, take away 124. So I can't take away 4 from 0, so I'm going to borrow from the 8 and make that a 7, and turn this into a 10. So 10 take away 4 is 6, 7 take away 2 is 5, and 1 take away 1 is 0, and therefore the missing angle at P is 56 degrees. Now, we often make mistakes with subtraction, so it's always worthwhile checking that I've got that right by adding 124 and 56 and making sure I get back to my original answer of 180. 6 add 4 is 10, 1 add 5 add 2 would be 8, and 1 would be 180. So I know I've got the right answer. And in terms of a reason, I need to say that 180 degrees on a straight line. And I might want to say angles on a straight line just to be careful, make sure the examiner gives me it. I'm asked in part B to work out the size of the angle marked Q, and I'm told with this little symbol down the bottom left hand side there, which you can maybe just about see, that this is a right angle, and therefore it is 90 degrees. So I need to do 90 degrees, take away 68, and again you might want to do a subtraction where I've had to borrow from the 9 and turn that into an 8, which makes me 10 take away 8 is 2, 8 take away 6 is 2, so I know the missing angle is 22. You may be able to do this one in your head and write 22 straight away, but still it's worth checking. If I add in 68 and 22, 6 add 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, that I've got the right answer. On question 20, I'm told that there are 600 counters in a bag and that 90 of the counters are yellow. And then I'm asked to work out what 90 would be as a fraction of 600, and I'm asked to write it in its simplest form. So first of all, 90 out of 600 I could write as a fraction, and then I'm going to try and cancel that down. So I can divide both the top number, 90, by 10, and the bottom number, 600, by 10. And then I'm going to get 9 over 60. And then I'm going to try and divide them down again, and I can see that both 9 and 60 are in the 3 times table. So 9 divided by 3 would be 3, and 60 divided by 3 would be 20. So my answer is going to be 3 20s. And I can't divide this down anymore because the only times tables that will go into 3 are 1, 2 and 3. 1 would leave me where I am, 2 doesn't divide into 3, 3 does divide into 3 but it doesn't divide into 20. And just for completeness, that's how I've simplified my fraction. In part B, I'm told that 180 of the 600 counters in the bag are red, and I'm asked to work out 180 as a percentage of 600. So again, I've got 180 out of 600, and I want it as a percentage. So as a percentage would mean out of 100. So I know that to get from 600 to 100, I'm going to divide by 6. So I'm going to have to do the same thing on the top. So I'm going to divide by 6, and that will get me out of 100. And that's going to give me 30 out of 100. Obviously, as a percentage, it will be 30%. In part C, I'm told that the rest of the counters in the bag are blue or green. So by this point, I've now got 4 different colours. I've got yellow, which I worked out in part A, I was told in part A, sorry, was 90. I've got red, which I was told in part B are 180. I've got blue, which I don't know, and I've got green, which I don't know. But I do know they come to a total of 600 counters. So if I add all of these up, I'm going to get 600. I'm told there are twice as many blue counters as green counters. So if I was to say the green counters would be a number signified by x, then blue would be twice as many, which would be 2x. And all I need to do now is figure out what these two bits should be when I add them up. Well, I can see that 2x add x is 3x, and I know that 90 add 180 is 270, and that I've got 600 in total. So what's left should be 600 take away 270, which is 330. So these two amounts here should total to 330. Now I'm left with an equation which I can solve. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and that will give me that 1x is equal to 110. Or in other words, the green counters are 110. So 110. I can just about get that on the answer line. In question 21, I've got a two-way table about how 100 children travel to school one day, so it's worth circling that. I might need it. It's actually given to me on the two-way table, so I should be okay. So I'm asked to complete the two-way table, and I can see that 15 boys walked, and I can see that a total of 37 walked, and therefore the difference between must be how many girls walked, and that's 22. The second thing I can see is that there are 14 boys who got to school by other means of transport, and 16 girls, so that must be 30 in total. Looking along the row for girls, I can see that there are 22 who walked, 8 who went by car, so a total of 30, another 16 who went by other means, so that would be 46. And I can just check that 46 add 54 does add to 100. I've got a couple of gaps here left to fill, so again looking along the total row, I can see that 37 walked, and 30 by other means of transport, so that's a total of 67. So I need to find out what would add on to 67 to get to 100, and that will be 33. And by the same logic, I know that a total of 33 people went by car, so I need to find out what adds on to 8 to give me the total for the boys by car, which is 25. Part B tells me that one of the children is picked at random, and I need to write down the probability that this child walked to school that day. So there are 100 children in total, and the probability the child walked, well, there are 37 children who walked, so the probability there will be 37 out of 100. I'm not asked to simplify, so I can leave that as it is. Part C says one of the girls is picked at random, so it's very specific. It tells me that it's just the girls, and there are 46 girls in total. Work out the probability that this girl did not walk to school that day, and again, did not walk to school. So my probability must be out of 46, and did not walk to school. Well, the girls who walked to school was 22, so the numbers that I'm after is the people who did not walk to school, and that would be given by the people who went in a car and who went by other means of transport. So 8 adds 16, if I add them up, I'm going to get 24. And again, I'm not asked to simplify, so I can leave it as it is. On question 22, I'm told that compasses cost c pence each and that rulers cost r pence each, and I'm asked to write down an expression for the total cost of 2 compasses, so 1 compass and another compass, and 4 rulers, so 4 rulers, r, 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 and r. Now, if I'm asked for a total cost, I must be adding the cost of each one together, so I'm going to add all of these together. So c add c is 2c. R add R add R add R would be 4 lots of R, or 4R, and I'm still adding those two together. And that's my answer. 2C plus 4R, and they've already put the units of pence on for me. On question 23, I'm asked to work out the size of angle A in this 4-sided shape. And what I need to remember is that there are 360 degrees in any 4-sided shape or in any quadrilateral. So it's simply a case of adding up the angles that I've got of 120, 140, 58. So 0 and 0 and 8 is 8. 2 and 4 is 6. Add 5 will be 11. 1 and 1 is 2. Add 1 would be 3. So I've got 318, and I need to take that away from 316 to find out what's missing. I can't take away 8 from 0, so I'm going to borrow 1 from the 6. 10 take away 8 is 2, 5 take away 1 is 4, and 3 take away 3 is 0. So my answer is 42 degrees. Now, it's worth checking that you've got this right, so again, I'm going to do 318, and I'm going to add on to that 42. 2 add 8 is 10, carry the 1, 1 add 4 is 5, plus 1 is 6, and I've still got the 3, so I know I've got it right. On question 24, I'm asked to solve the equation 4x plus 1 equals 9. So what it's looking for, and it tells me down here, is it wants some value for x to be equal to. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and balance my equation. And to do that, I'm going to try and end up with, at the end of this, x equals on its own on the left-hand side. So the first thing I'm going to get rid of is I'm going to get rid of this plus 1. And to do that, I'm going to take away 1 from both sides. And if I take away 1 from the left-hand side, I'm just left with 4x. And if I take away 1 from the right-hand side, I'm just left with 8. Now, I know that 4x is the same as 4 times x. So if I want to undo that 4 times, I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And that will tell me what one lot of x will be. Well, if I divide 4x by 4, I get to x. And if I do 8 divided by 4, I get to 2. So my answer for x is 2. And if I want to, I can just check that by saying, okay, 4 lots of 2 would be 8, add 1 would be 9, and I've got the right answer. Now for part B, I've got a similar equation, and this time I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add 1 to both sides to undo this take away 1. So I need to do the opposite, and I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And that is going to get me 2y equals 13. Now I know that 2y is the same as 2 times y, same as above, just got a bit more space, and that's the same as 13. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and that's going to get me that y is equal to 13 divided by 2. Now that's obviously not a whole number. Now a couple of ways, either you can work that one out as it's relatively straightforward, but easier than that is to write it as a fraction, which is 13 divided by 2, and then we don't have to work anything out. They would accept a real answer in terms of a decimal, which would be 6.5, but I'm going to go with 13 divided by 2 as I don't have to work anything out. On question 25, I'm asked to rotate the shaded shape, which is given here, clockwise, which is that way around, and 90 degrees, which would be that far, about the point O. The point O is given in the middle. So for this question, I'm going to need a piece of tracing paper, and I'm going to place it on my diagram, and I'm going to trace the shape at the top. I then need to spin it 90 degrees clockwise, so I'm going to mark on an arrow going straight up so that I know that when I'm finished, my arrow should be pointing straight across here, and then I'll have gone through my 90 degrees from there to there. Okay, so I'll point on there and spin it 90 degrees until it is pointing straight across. I can see now that I've gone all the way around. What I need to do now is transfer this shape onto the piece of tracing paper. So I'm going to try and line up one of the points there, which is at 2, -2, and I'm going to mark it on. And then I'm going to do the same for the other points underneath, and then for the rest of the points I can line them up and make sure that eventually I end up with a shape that is the same size as the one I started with. Now it's not as tidy, but with a pencil obviously you can make it a lot neater and draw it with a ruler, and that's my final shape that's been rotated 90 degrees clockwise about the point O. For part B of this question, I'm asked to describe the single transformation, and there are 4 transformations. The first one I'm going to talk about is reflections. Then we've got rotations, which we've just done above. We've got enlargements, and we've got translations. Now what I'm after here is a translation. Okay, so this is going to be a translation, and that's just a movement left and right and up and down. Now I'm going to go from shape P to shape Q, so worth letting me know that I'm going in that direction, because the answer will be different if I'm going the other way. And I'm going to pick a corner on the point P, and I'm going to try and move it to the same corner on the point Q. So first off I'm going to go left and right, so 1, 2, 3. So I've gone 3 right, and I've gone 1 down. And I'm not asked to write it in vector format, but if I was, I could have written that as 3 right and 1 down. On question 26, I'm given a rectangle. I'm given that the left hand side and the right hand side are both x, which makes sense because they're parallel and the same distance in a rectangle. And I'm told that the top is 4x plus 1, but the bottom is 2x plus 12. Now they should be the same length in a rectangle. The first part of the question, part A, says explain why 4x plus 1 equals 2x plus 12. And that's what we've just covered. So we're going to write down the opposite sides in a rectangle are equal in length. Okay, part B, I'm asked to solve 4x plus 1 equals 2x plus 12. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get rid of the smallest number of x. I'm going to try and eliminate this on the right hand side so that I can come up with an answer that ends with x equals. And in this answer I don't therefore have any x on both sides of my equation. So I'm going to try and get rid of that 2x, and I'm going to take away 2x from both sides. And that way on the left hand side, 4x take 2x is 2x. I've still got add 1. On the right hand side, this has disappeared, so I'm just left with add 12 or just 12. If it was negative 12, I'd obviously have to leave the negative sign in. I'm now going to try and get rid of the other parts of the equation I no longer want. Now I don't want 2x with 1 added onto it, I just want x, so I'm going to get rid of that add 1 by subtracting 1. And if I do that to both sides, on the right hand side I'm going to get 11, and if I take it away on the left hand side I've still got 2 lots of x. Now I'm nearly there, I just want 1 lot of x, so I'm going to half my x's by dividing by 2 to undo this 2 lots of x, 2 times x. So I'm going to end up with x equals 11 divided by 2. And again, as we said, you can work that out. It's easier to leave it as a fraction sometimes, as 11 over 2. You may know the answer to that as a decimal, which is 5.5. Either way, they can go in there. Part C asks me to work out the perimeter of the rectangle. Now, perimeter, I need to mark the sides on the diagram above. So the right hand side would be 5.5, the left hand side would be 5.5, and I need to know either the top or the bottom. Now looking at this, it looks to me that this is a more straightforward expression to use. So I want to take 2x plus 12, and I want to know what that would be equal to if x was 5.5. Now if I put 5.5 in there, I'm going to have 2 times by 5.5, that's my 2 lots of x, and I'm going to add 12 to it. Well, 2 lots of 5.5 is going to be 11, and I want to add 12 to that, and that's going to be 23. That means that this side of the rectangle and this side of the rectangle are 23. So for the perimeter, I'm going to want all the way around the outside, so I'm going to have 23 add 23, which is 46, and I'm going to add on 5.5 and another 5.5, which will come to 11, and I need to add those two together to get 57 centimetres, and again they've already given me my units. In question 27, I'm given the plan view of the shape, which is simply the top, and I'm given the front elevation, and I'm then asked to draw the side elevation of the solid shape. So I would say, if I wanted to draw the side elevation of the shape, the first thing I need to do is figure out how tall the shape is. Now, from looking at the front elevation, I can see that it is 2 squares tall. So from the side, my shape would still have to be 2 squares tall. I also need to know from the side how deep my shape is. Now I'm looking at the plan, or the top, I can see that the shape goes backwards 2 squares as well. So from the side, that distance would be the 2 squares going backwards. After that, it's a case of filling in the remainder of the shape, and that is what it would look like from the side. In part B, I'm asked to draw a sketch of the solid shape. So I would start with the front elevation and draw a rough copy of that there, and then I would repeat that elsewhere in the space provided. And then all I've got to do is join up corresponding points on those two-dimensional shapes to create a three-dimensional sketch of the shape. On question 28, I'm told that someone is taking a survey of the magazines read by students, and he wants to design a questionnaire. So I'm told to design a suitable question to find out what types of magazines students read. So I'm going to use that question in my answer. So what types of magazines do you read? And I need to give, for the second mark out of the 2, I need to give some response boxes. So I need to give a few options. So I might try sports, I might try TV, I may try anything I can think of. It might be comedy magazines, I don't know. As long as you pick at least 3 of those and then add in an option for other, you'll get both marks. In part B, you put the question below on his questionnaire, which was how many magazines have you read? A few and a lot. I'm asked to design a better question. So I'm asked how many. So I'm looking for a number. So I'm going to use the same question, how many magazines have you read in the past month? And the difference here is I've given this time frame of a month. No time frame here makes it very difficult for you to answer it. And then I need to give some options. So I'm going to put 0, you might have read none. I'm going to go with 1 to 5, and then I'm going to go for 6 to 10. And I'm making sure that none of these boxes overlap. I can't put any answer in both boxes at once. And then I'm going to make sure I've got a box at the end for 11 or more. Question 29. I'm told that 322 times by 48 is 15,456, and I'm asked to work out a sum that looks very, very similar. Now, 3.22 times by 4.8, the answer is going to be using the same numbers as I've already got, and all I need to do is figure out whereabouts I need to put the decimal point, or maybe add zeros on the end depending on the question. So 3.22 is substantially smaller than 322. I've in fact divided it by 100. 48 and 4.8, well 4.8 is smaller than 48, so my answer is going to be smaller than 48, and I've divided it by 10. So I'm looking to take my answer from the first part of the question and divide it by 100, which would make it into 154.56, and then divide that by 10, which would make it into 15.456. Part B, I've got 0.322, which I've divided 322 by 1000 to get that answer, and I've got 0.48, which I've divided by 100. So I'm looking to take my answer here of 15456 and divide it by 1000, which would move my numbers to the right, and therefore the decimal point would appear to move to the left 1, 2, 3 places, and then I'm going to divide it by 100. So similarly, that the numbers would move to the right, and that would make the decimal point appear as if it was moving to the left. So 1, 2. So I'm going to get a decimal point at the front of the number, and it's important therefore that I put a leading zero in so that I know my answer is 0.15456, and we need to put this zero in. Now in the third part of the question, a little bit trickier, I've got 15,456 divided by 4.8. And that relies on me rearranging this first sum and writing that 15,456 divided by 48 must be the other number in my calculation, 322. Now, if 322 48s go into 15,456, I just need to make a decision as to whether more 4.8s, which is smaller, would go in, or fewer 4.8s would go in. Now, obviously, as this is smaller, more of them are going to go into 15,000, so my answer is going to get bigger. And the difference between these two numbers here is order 10, so I'm going to get 10 times more of that number going in, so I'm looking for 3,220. On question 30, I'm given an equation which is 2x squared equals 72, or 2 lots of x squared equals 72, and I'm asked to find a value for x. So I'm going to write that as 2 lots of x squared, but instead of lots of, I'm going to use a mathematical operator which is multiply, and that's 2 times x squared equals 72. And now I'm just going to try and isolate x, get it on its own to find a value for it. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to start with, and that will get rid of this part of the equation, leaving x squared on its own, and therefore I'm going to get x squared equals 72 divided by 2, 36. And now I want to get rid of the squared, so I'm going to do the opposite of squared, which is square root, and I'm going to square root both sides, and that would leave me with x on the left hand side and 6 on the right hand side. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that there are two answers here, 6 or negative 6, and that's because 6 times 6 equals 36. Also, negative 6 times negative 6 equals 36. So when I square root 36 here, I'm either going to get 6 or negative 6. But the question just says find a value, so I'm just going to write down 6. In part B, I'm asked to express 72 as a product, which is multiply, prime numbers, which start with 2, 3, 5, etc., and factors. So I'm going to start by drawing a factor tree and starting with 72. I need to find two numbers that multiply together to give me 72. And I'm going to use 8 and 9. Neither of these is prime, so I'm going to continue from the 9. And that will be 3 times 3. And then from the 8, again, numbers multiplying to give me 8 would be 2 and 4. So I've still got the number 4, which isn't prime. I'm going to continue from 4, which is 2 times 2. And then I'm left with a series of prime numbers on the end of my branches. And it's just a case now of writing them out as a product. So from smallest to largest, I've got 2 times by 2 times by 2 times by 3 times by 3, which is 72 expressed as a product of prime factors. And you can check that by doing 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 would be 8, 8 times 3 would be 24, and 24 times 3 would be 72. That concludes the exam paper.